Imagine waking up to find that the price of your morning coffee and your bagel has skyrocketed. Oh, and the Canadian economy is in a complete freefall nosedive. What's the cause? A single tweet from the president down south, Donald Trump. Hey everyone, Myles, Nowik here from the Nowik Mortgage Team, powered by Andy Mortgage, bringing you another deep dive into the world of finance, economics, and how global politics can shape your wallets. Today we're discussing the story equal parts alarming and, to be honest, kind of fascinating in a way. I promised myself I wouldn't talk about it, but here I am talking about Donald Trump again. Donald Trump has revived his November 2024 idea of slapping a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. And if that actually happens, Canada could face its biggest economic crisis in decades. So buckle up, because we're breaking this all down step by step, section by section. Let's start with the basics. Canada and the US exchange roughly $3.6 billion in goods every single day. That's nearly $800 billion a year. Canada buys about 372 billion US exports, accounting for about 17% of all of their exports. Meanwhile, 75% of Canadian exports, about $436 billion worth of them, go straight to the United States. And here's the kicker. This heavy reliance makes Canada in a uniquely vulnerable situation with US trade policies. When the US sneezes, Canada doesn't just catch a cold, we wind up in the hospital. Now, for a quick refresher on tariffs, as it's apparently become one of the top Googled terms, tariffs are essentially a tax on imports. If the US slapped a 25% tariff on, say, Canadian maple syrup, United States importers would foot that bill and then pass that cost on to the American consumers. In the short term, Canadians might see benefits from cheaper maple syrup, thanks to an oversupply. But the medium-term picture, well, it's kind of brutal. Canadian manufacturers would probably see demand dry up, factories would probably start shutting down, and we'd probably see mass unemployment that would create economic turbulence. And this wouldn't just be in the syrup sector. I'm just using that as an example because I love maple syrup. Now, if we want to look at the different sectors that could be affected, the first one we want to look at is oil and gas. Canada exports over 3 million barrels of oil per day to the United States. Tariffs would flood the Canadian market with oversupply, sending prices and Alberta's economy into a bit of a nosedive. And here's the catch. Infrastructure issues mean Canada can't just ship oil to Europe or Asia. Because of the land connection between Canada and the United States, getting the oil over to them has been relatively easy, and elsewhere is a bit more of a different story. Next, we want to look at the automotive industry. With 500,000 jobs and 10% of Canada's manufacturing GDP on the line, tariffs on auto parts would be catastrophic. Within a year, we could see factory closures and massive layoffs, which could really affect our economy. The other thing we want to look at? Lumber. Canada supplies 80% of the United States softwood lumber. Tariffs wouldn't just hurt Canadian forestry jobs, but US housing costs could spike by 10 to 20% depending on how things roll out. Another thing we want to chat about is agriculture. Canadian farmers export $73 billion in goods like wheat, beef, pork, and other things to the United States. Rural economies, which employ 1 in 7 Canadians, would really be hit the hardest from this. Another thing we want to talk about is natural resources. Canada dominates global production of potash, uranium, and aluminum. Tariffs on these exports would disrupt industries worldwide, but Canada would feel the immediate pain and the brunt of it. We also have to look at broader economic impacts from this. The ripple effect of tariffs would be devastating to Canada's economy. We could see the GDP shrink by roughly 3 to 4%. We could see double-digit unemployment numbers that would gut consumer spending and tax revenues, forcing the government to slash infrastructure and social programs. Meanwhile, the Canadian dollar would weaken, driving the cost of imports up, fueling inflation. Even the Canadian financial sector would take a hit, with banks heavily exposed to fossil fuel investments feeling quite a bit of pain from this. Another big question that's been asked is, does Canada have any leverage here? And here's the silver lining. Canada isn't completely defenseless. When it comes to natural resources, Canada supplies 60% of the US crude oil and 85% of its electricity imports. Replacing these resources would be no small feat and would probably be very expensive for the United States. When it comes to a logistical advantage, Canada's proximity to the US keeps trade costs quite low, so bringing things in from other places, which could potentially be further distances and things like that, could increase the costs of goods even further because of that transportation cost. And then manufacturing surpluses. Canada buys more manufactured goods from the United States than it exports, giving it some leverage in negotiations. Plus, Trudeau has already vowed to match tariffs dollar for dollar, raising the stakes on this. Now, I know he's stepping down and someone is filling his place, but I'm willing to bet that whoever steps into this role is probably going to be ready to fight back. We're Canadians. We're not going to be bought. We're not going to become another state. And we're definitely not just going to roll over and take it. I mean, piss us off enough, and we may have to start sending over some Canadian geese. Yeah, those buggers. Yikes. Now, let's be real about this. A full-blown trade war would hurt both nations, but Canada would bear the brunt of it. And here's where I think it gets a bit interesting. Trump's threats may just be a negotiation tactic ahead of the 2026 USMCA review. The goal? Better terms for the United States. Ultimately, this whole situation underscores one thing. Canada must diversify its trade partnerships. Betting 75% of your economy on one neighbor, it's a risky game. I wouldn't throw 75% of my assets into one stock hoping it's going to skyrocket. You diversify, and that's what Canada needs to do. Now I want to know what you think. Is Trump serious about these tariffs? Or is this all about flexing ahead of the USMCA talks? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss another video. Once again, my name is Myles Nowik. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.